Alan Ball, a fiery midfielder who shortly after winning the World Cup in 1966 with England, joined Everton from Blackpool for a then transfer record fee of £110,000. But it proved money well spent as he transformed Everton and they went on to win the league in 1970. A potent cocktail of courage, delicacy and a burning desire to win, Ball at his best was an awesome sight. In the early part of his career at Everton, his goal scoring put most forwards to shame, as he produced 56 goals in 3 seasons. He later moved on to captain Arsenal, and in total earned 72 caps for England. Once described by Pelé as the best player in the world, the Belfast boy George Best crossed the Irish Sea for Manchester as a 15-year-old in 1961. By 1965, he'd won the league championship and his star status was confirmed after a mesmeric display in Lisbon against Benfica, which earned him the nickname El Beetle. He became the biggest superstar English football had ever seen, bringing the swinging 60s onto the football pitch. His greatest year remains 1968, when he was a goal scorer in the European Cup final and was named European Footballer of the Year. Sadly, as United started to slide in the early 70s, so did George. His last game for United was in 1974, and despite continuing his career at a whole host of smaller clubs, he never reached those heights again. Some say he never fulfilled his amazing talent, but George would strongly dispute that. After all, he won nearly every honour in the game and racked up just under 500 appearances for United, scoring 180 goals. No one can argue that he is still regarded as the greatest ever player for Manchester United. If there's one player who personifies the Revy years at Leeds, it's Billy Bremner. This firebrand Scotsman was his manager's voice on the field. Leeds fans identify with him as one of the club's all-time legends, and that's because he was simply one of their best ever players. He played out his whole career in the centre of midfield, a minefield of flying boots and aggression. He was small in stature, but possessed immense physical strength and unbreakable will. A leader of his team, totally unselfish, and often a target for hostility from opposition players and fans. His personality also made him the man most likely to be involved in confrontation with referees. But beneath all that, he was a gifted passer of the ball, tactically astute, and superb going forward looking for goals. When he died, young, Leeds and Scotland lost a man who was irreplaceable. When Alan Clark signed for Leeds from Leicester City in 1969, he was a big-name striker already. Some suggested he'd have trouble integrating into a close-knit team group, but as usual, Don Revie had done his homework. He knew Clark was quality, and he knew he would fit the team well, because this was a player who wanted to succeed at the highest level. Clark was simply one of the coolest finishers of his time. He had a superb touch on the ball, and like all top strikers, there was a hint of selfishness in his play. He wanted to put the ball in the net, and he was expert at it. However big the game, Clarke was the type of player who expected to score. For a time in the early 70s, he was recognised as England's best striker. And although he did have an individualist streak, his love for Leeds was real and lasted long after his playing days. In a team of stars, John Giles stood out. That's because he was a world-class midfielder. Manchester United's decision to let him go to Leeds in 1963 came to haunt them. Unlike many of the home-produced youngsters in the squad, he was a player Leeds set out to capture in the transfer market because they knew the influence he'd bring with him. He arrived as a talented winger, but Leeds polished him into the complete midfield player. He was simply the best passer of his generation. A dead ball expert and a magnificent tactician. But along with Billy Bremner, he formed a formidable midfield double act. He could be hard and uncompromising. And he possessed an insatiable desire to drive Leeds towards success. His great career continued even after he'd left Leeds in 1974 to rejuvenate West Bromwich Albion. And he helped take the Republic of Ireland onto the world stage for the first time. Having started his football career in humble surroundings at Scunthorpe, no one could have guessed that when Kevin Keegan signed for Bill Shankly's Liverpool at a cost of £35,000 at the end of the 1970-71 season, it would become one of the greatest bargains ever in the English transfer market. Mighty Mouse, as he was affectionately known, came in as a midfielder, but after some devastating displays in pre-season, he was converted into a striker, scoring on his debut. And the rest, as they say, is history. By the time he left, Keegan had tallied a total of 100 goals for Liverpool. He was revered all over the continent, eventually signing for Hamburg in Germany, where he went on to become European Footballer of the Year twice. Later, he'd come home to England to play for Southampton and Newcastle United, where his presence and skill continued to inspire teammates and bring joy to millions of fans around the world. His last season as a player for Newcastle resulted in their promotion to the then First Division, and he's since been hailed as the messiah of the club, transforming Newcastle's fortunes as a manager. Peter Lorimer, revered as one of the finest individual talents ever to have played for Leeds United and Scotland. Like so many others in a unique period for the club, Lorimer was moulded by the club from a talented, raw youth into an all-round player and a man with a temperament to deal with even the hottest atmosphere in club and international football. By trade he was a winger, but he was far too clever a player to be restricted to such a role. He could play anywhere on the right-hand side, often tucking into midfield. He had a magnificent goal-scoring record, 238 goals, a club record in a 19-year career. His ball striking was simply world-class. Every keeper feared the power of his shooting, the master of the spectacular. For many years, the number 9 shirt has held a revered place in the hearts of Newcastle United supporters. No striker did more for the St James's faithful than Malcolm MacDonald. Supermac also starred for Arsenal, proving himself one of the most prolific strikers in the history of the British game. During the 70s, his goals helping both clubs to cup final appearances at Wembley. For Newcastle, MacDonald scored 95 goals in 187 games before he moved south to Highbury, where he produced 42 in 84 games. A phenomenal scoring record, ensuring the name Supermac is still known wherever you go. Affectionately known as Ozzy, Peter Osgood, the king of Stamford Bridge during the 60s and 70s. A Chelsea legend, a classy forward, a renowned finisher who ended Division 1 top scorer in 1969-70 with 31 goals. He was at his peak around this time, an FA Cup winner in 1970, and he also helped Chelsea win the European Cup Winners' Cup the following year, beating Real Madrid no less. Later in his career, he'd moved to Southampton, where he won the FA Cup all over again. It's a mystery that he won just 4 England caps, though he was in the squad for the 1970 World Cup finals in Mexico. In a career that spans 16 years in total, Ozzy played for Chelsea, Southampton and briefly Norwich before he returned to the Blues in 1978. In total, he played 560 matches, scoring 220 goals. Now an after-dinner speaker and football pundit, Ozzy still lives and breathes the people's game. Still the record cap holder for England. Peter Shilton will go down as one of the greatest goalkeepers to have graced English or world football. Statistically, the safest keeper in Leicester City's history, the talented Shilton's football career spans decades. He was born in Leicester in 1949 and went on to become the club's youngest ever player at the tender age of 16 and a half, when he replaced the equally legendary Gordon Banks. In all, he made 339 first-team appearances for Leicester. He then moved on to Stoke and achieved the peak at Nottingham Forest, winning league titles and European Cups. He played on at the top for Southampton and Derby, and in all, made an incredible 1,005 league appearances. But it's his 125 England caps that truly sets Shilton apart as a legend of football. Cultured midfielder for West Ham and England, Trevor Brooking is one of the East End club's elite. He joined the Hammers as an apprentice in 1965 and spent his whole career with the club, retiring in 1984 after making more than 600 appearances and scoring over 100 goals. Famously helped the club to 2 FA Cup victories in 1975 and 1980, and in the latter match against Arsenal scored the only goal of the game with a rare header. The England international personified West Ham's dedication to the beautiful game. Now we salute King Eric. Eric Cantona goes down as one of the greatest players ever to wear a Manchester United shirt. But it all started so unpromisingly. An unknown quantity with a suspect temperament, eyebrows were raised when the French enigma signed from Premiership champions Leeds United in 1992. But a transfer fee of just £1 million has to go down as one of Sir Alex Ferguson's best ever pieces of business. Cantona was the missing piece in the jigsaw, the difference between runners-up and champions. With Cantona, United stormed to their first Premiership crown in 1992-93. It was followed by League and Cup doubles